laughing when I killed my mother.
Why'd you get rid of that shirt?
It had pieces of my mother's brain stuck to it. I killed Josh with a sledgehammer too.
Eat somewhere around like this? Really scared.
In a world where families are supposed to offer comfort and care, some teens crossed a chilling line, turning their rage into unthinkable violence. From Andrea Balcer's murder for personal struggles to Cody Posey's chilling crime for deep psychological turmoil, these teenagers made choices that wore out their families forever. Let's begin.
This question would be, I snapped. I took my little K bar there and planted it straight into my mother's back. And then...
On Halloween night, October 31st, 2016, Winthrop, Maine experienced one of the most horrifying crimes in its history. 17-year-old Andrea Balcer made a chilling 911 call, confessing to stabbing her parents to death. Initially, she told the dispatcher she had snapped, citing struggles with gender identity and acceptance. In a moment of rage, she took the lives of the very people who had raised her. Andrea's story was both shocking and heartbreaking. That night, she made a devastating choice that changed everything. While hugging her mother, she suddenly pulled out a knife and stabbed her. Her father, awakened by the screams, rushed to help, only for Andrea to turn on him as well. A military-style knife was later found near his body. The tragedy didn't end there. She also killed the family's small pet. However, when her older brother, Christopher, stood before her, she spared him, saying, "It's not your day." When the police arrived, they expected to find someone in distress, but Andrea remained calm. As she spoke to detectives, she even laughed while recounting the events. Her lack of remorse was deeply unsettling.
Kind of quickly beaten out of me, you know?
Andrea later claimed she had struggled with gender identity and felt her parents didn't support her. She also alleged that her mother had been mistreated. However, her family strongly denied these claims. Her uncle, Carl Pierce, insisted that Andrea's parents were loving and supportive. He called her accusations an insult to their family, stating that nothing could justify the horrific crime she had committed.
I told them what I wanted to be, you know. I question my identity.
Christopher, Andrea's older brother, struggled to understand her actions and could not forgive her. In a heartfelt statement, he said, "I still hear our mother's screams every night. She was stabbed by the son who loved her so much. You are an inhuman creature." His words were filled with pain and sorrow as he recalled the horrific events that took their parents' lives. Andrea pleaded guilty in hopes of receiving a lesser sentence. The judge acknowledged her struggles with gender identity, but emphasized that personal challenges could never justify such violence. Ultimately, she was sentenced to 40 years in prison. As the sentence was read, she began to cry.
My entire support system was destroyed, and what was left was an extended family that did their best to make sure I was safe and healthy, but couldn't replace what I've lost.
Though tragic, the crime could not be excused by its underlying reasons. The court acknowledged Andrea's age and past, but emphasized accountability. Christopher, now orphaned, struggled with the weight of his sister's actions, while Andrea faced the lifelong consequences of her choice.
Keeping Mr. Balcer in the juvenile system would greatly diminish the gravity of this offense. This is an incredibly heinous murder of his parents, and keeping him in that system would diminish that offense greatly.
The community was shaken, a family shattered. While Andrea pleaded for forgiveness, her surviving relatives couldn't grant it. Some saw a troubled teen acting out of pain, others a remorseless killer. Andrea's act was horrific, driven by sinister emotions. Our next case shows a brutal act of oppression that will leave you speechless.
How my sister and my grandma still forgave me on that very first day.
On October 14th, 2021, 17-year-old Ethan Orton made a decision that would alter his life forever. Living in Cedar Rapids, Iowa with his parents, Casey Arthur Orton and Misty Scott Slade, Ethan had always felt emotionally neglected. He told a psychologist that his parents were emotionally and verbally harmful, leaving him isolated and unwanted. The breaking point came when his mother emailed him the day before, informing him he had to move out when he turned 18. This pushed him over the edge. That night, as the house lay in silence, Ethan put his plan into motion. His mother rested in a chair while his father slept on the couch. He approached his mother first, gently waking her. She stirred, confused as he gripped a large knife. Startled, she attempted to rise, but tension filled the moment. His father, still asleep, remained unaware. Ethan then turned his attention to him, ensuring he stayed undisturbed. His mother, struggling, moved towards the kitchen in search of safety. He followed, determined to finish what he started. Grabbing another knife, he ensured there were no loose ends. Then, spotting an axe nearby, he made his final move. As the night stretched on, the house returned to silence. He had completed what he had set out to do, and nothing remained uncertain. When the police arrived, Ethan did not hide the truth. He admitted to what he had done, saying he wanted to take charge of his life. However, investigators found no signs of neglect or mistreatment. They only discovered the common disagreements that many teenagers experience with their parents.
I just know for a fact that I'm doing my part being up here, knowing that this is something that needed to be addressed, especially something that I thought I'd never do in my entire life.
As the case moved to trial, experts examined Ethan's mental state. A forensic psychologist testified that he did not suffer from any mental illness. He was intelligent, capable of logical thinking, and had carefully planned his actions. His choices were deliberate, not impulsive.
Described himself as a quiet, reserved person, a good kid, denied problematic behavior.
In June 2023, after reviewing all the evidence, the judge made his decision. Ethan received 2 life sentences for his actions. However, because of his young age, the law allowed him a chance for parole. He will be eligible for release after serving 50 years in prison. By that time, he will be 67 years old, an age when most people look forward to retirement and a quiet life. As Ethan heard these words, tears welled up in his eyes as he realized what he had done.
Today's 3-hour hearing included testimony from forensic psychologist Dr. Tracy Thomas. She describes Orton as an emotionally over-controlled people-pleaser who internalized a lot of family problems.
As the courtroom emptied, the weight of his choices became clear. What had started as a desire for control had led to a lifetime behind bars, a future shaped by a single irreversible night. In court, Ethan expressed remorse. He said, "One thing that is really important here is I am really sorry for all this." He wished he could take back what he did. Some of his relatives forgave him, but others could not comprehend how he could commit such a brutal act.
Something that should have never been done. What's really important here is that I really am sorry for all this.
Ethan's case is a heart-wrenching reminder that communication and support are crucial in families. While he may have felt unheard, his actions were extreme and irreversible. His case raises complex questions about emotional neglect, teenage mental health, and the devastating consequences of bottled-up emotions. Ethan's sorrowful pursuit of control takes 2 innocent lives. The next case reveals how emotional turmoil spirals into darkness.
If you accidentally ran over someone and killed them, would that bother you?
On a quiet night in Hendersonville, Tennessee, a crime unfolded that left the entire community in shock. 15-year-old Zachary Davis brutally murdered his mother, Melanie Davis, while she slept. What made the case even more chilling was his cold, emotionless demeanor during his confession. Zachary was 9 years old when he lost his father to ALS, a devastating disease that altered his life forever. After his father's passing, he struggled with deep sadness and isolation. His grandmother, Gail Cron, later revealed that he had fallen into depression. Yet his mother, Melanie Davis, never sought the mental health support he needed. As the years passed, he became increasingly withdrawn, and his fascination with dark and violent topics intensified. On the night of August 10, 2012, tragedy struck their Hendersonville home. As his mother slept, Zachary crept into her room, gripping a heavy sledgehammer. Without hesitation, he struck her nearly 20 times. When asked later why he did it, he coldly replied, "I wanted to make sure she was dead."
You killed your mother. And why did you kill her?
She wasn't taking care of my family.
But the horror didn't end there. After killing his mother, Zachary set fire to the house with his older brother still inside. Whether he intended to cover his crime or had darker motives remains unclear. Fortunately, his brother escaped unharmed, but nothing could undo the devastating loss. As investigators delved into Zachary's life, they uncovered disturbing details that painted a dark picture. He had developed a fascination with violent video games and horror stories, particularly Stephen King's Misery. His interest extended to phone apps related to serial killers and torture devices. Perhaps the most unsettling discovery was a notebook filled with eerie writings. One chilling quote read, "You can't spell laughter without slaughter." These words hinted at a mind consumed by darkness.
It said some things in there. Is that notepad yours that we found?
Despite his troubling behavior, mental health experts couldn't agree on a specific diagnosis. However, one thing was clear. Zachary understood the difference between right and wrong. He wasn't legally insane. During his police confession and later in court, Zachary showed no emotion. He spoke in a flat, monotone voice, never expressing regret or repentance for what he had done. This deeply disturbed both the judge and the jury. It was not just the crime that horrified them, but the way he seemed completely detached from it. His actions, combined with his lack of emotion, left everyone wondering what had truly led him down such a dark path.
Do you do the things your father asked you to do? Sometimes.
He was found guilty of first-degree murder, attempted first-degree murder, and aggravated arson. In April 2015, he received an automatic life imprisonment for murdering his mother. Later in June, the judge added 20 more years to his sentence, making his total prison time at least 71 years before he could be considered for parole. During sentencing, Judge D. David Gay stated to sentencing him to life in prison, but he showed no guilt for his act, which made the crime even more chilling.
Zachary Davis was described as anything but normal, whispering every spoken word as if trying to hide his true voice.
The case of Zachary left people with mixed emotions. His crime was horrific, and his lack of shame made it difficult to feel sympathy for him. However, his grandmother believed that if he had received proper mental health treatment after his father's death, this tragedy could have been avoided. In the end, this case serves as a chilling reminder of what can happen when deep emotional struggles go unnoticed and untreated. Zachary's cold confession left the courtroom in shock. The next case explores a violent story fueled by sentimental struggles.
Anyway, so if he's around somewhere here, I don't think he's likely to cause any trouble.
He doesn't seem like he'd be a real threat to the community. It seemed like he was in a stressful situation.
At just 14 years old, Cody Posey committed a crime that shocked everyone. To outsiders, the Posey family appeared happy. He lived with his father, Delbert Paul Posey, his stepmother Trione, and his stepsister Mary Lee on a ranch in New Mexico. His father worked for renowned journalist Sam Donaldson, and from the outside, their life seemed picture perfect. But behind closed doors, Cody endured relentless mistreatment at the hands of his father. No one knew the horrors he faced, until the day he couldn't take it anymore. On July 4, 2004, Cody reached his breaking point. His father, enraged as usual, slapped him across the face. But this time, something inside him snapped. The following day, July 5th, he grabbed a shotgun and walked into the house. His stepmother sat on the couch, reading a book. Without hesitation, Cody shot her twice in the back of the head. Moments later, his father entered the room and Cody shot him too. His stepsister, Mary Lee, who had just walked in, was the last to be killed. In an attempt to cover up the crime, Cody loaded the bodies into a backhoe and buried them in a shallow grave beneath a pile of manure. He believed no one would ever discover his secret. But the truth was about to surface in the most horrifying way. On July 6th, journalist Sam Donaldson stopped by the ranch and was met with a gruesome sight: broken glass and signs of violence everywhere. He immediately called the police, and within hours, investigators uncovered the shallow graves. Cody was arrested the next day, on July 7th. Initially, he denied any involvement, but it didn't take long for him to confess. What he revealed left everyone in shock.
If the court turns this young man loose on society, he'll kill again if it suits his purpose.
Cody told the police that his father had mistreated him for years. He was beaten, kicked, and forced to work long hours without food or water. He was woken up with an electric cattle prod, whipped with a lasso, and even dragged behind a horse. But the worst came on the night before the murders. His father had tried to force him into something unthinkable. He wanted him to have a physical relationship with his stepmother. When he refused, his father burned him with a welding iron. That was the moment when he realized he couldn't endure the mistreatment any longer.
He snapped from physical and sexual abuse.
I was overwhelmed. I lost control of emotion. I didn't know what I was feeling.
His lawyers contended that he had reached a breaking point, losing control after years of harm. Former stepmothers, ranch workers, and others who had witnessed his father's cruelty supported his claims. When Cody took the stand, he broke down as he recounted the horrors he had endured. However, the prosecution maintained that Cody had planned the murders and exaggerated his claims of mistreatment. They highlighted the brutality of the crime and his attempt to conceal it. In the end, he was convicted on different charges for each victim: first-degree murder for his stepsister, Mary Lee; second-degree murder for his stepmother, Trione; and voluntary manslaughter for his father, Paul. When the verdict was read, Cody sobbed, broke down in tears, and lowered his head onto the table.
But he's expected to have an established plan on what course his life will take.
Despite the severity of the crime, Cody was sentenced as a juvenile. Instead of spending his life in prison, he was sent to a juvenile detention center with psychiatric treatment. Many people, including Mary Lee's biological father, believed that he had already suffered enough. On his 21st birthday, October 9, 2010, Cody was released. His exact whereabouts today remain unknown. Some believe he's living under a new identity, trying to leave his painful past behind. The case of Cody leaves people with mixed emotions. On one hand, he committed a terrible crime. On the other, he was a child who had suffered unimaginable mistreatment, with no one to protect him. Up next is Tariq Jackson, whose actions shocked everyone who knew him. What led to this shocking crime, and how did it all unfold?
The life that we was living, being in gangs and all that other stuff, it ain't worth 16 years or a death, because eventually you be put in a situation, and there's severe consequences that come with that.
This is Tariq Jackson, who was on trial for murder in Michigan. On July 12, 2015, 16-year-old Tariq Jackson allegedly pulled out a gun and opened fire in public after a fight broke out between rival Ypsilanti gangs in 2015. One of the bullets that Tariq had shot hit 20-year-old Andrea Duff in the head, killing him instantly. Tariq was charged with open murder, armed robbery, receiving and concealing a stolen firearm, 3 counts of felony firearm, and 11 counts of perjury. However, shortly before he was set to go on trial, he confessed to second-degree murder. This murder was not the first time Tariq committed a crime because he had a lengthy criminal history. In 2012, he was placed on probation as a minor for a first-degree home invasion. He was also placed on probation for a third-degree home invasion in August 2014, before being arrested for carrying a concealed weapon a few months later. He was eventually sentenced, and it was an emotional day for everyone there. The mother of the victim gave an impact statement.
Our whole world was turned upside down from that point. And the reason why I'm sharing this is because that when our children make these decisions out here.
Andrea Duff's mother blamed the gang culture the men found themselves in. She addressed Tariq directly as she delivered her statement. She said, "Our whole world was turned upside down. Our young men are lost out there. I don't want to see another young man go behind bars." Duff's mother also told Tariq that she forgave him and hoped he found salvation. Andrea Duff had previously been charged with the murder of 17-year-old Keon Washington. The charges against him were later dropped due to a lack of sufficient evidence to charge him. Tariq eventually had his chance to address the court, as he apologized for his actions, showing remorse and obvious regret for his actions.
First off, I just want to say sorry to the family of the victim. I wish the situation would have played out like that. I never thought that my choices and decisions would have affected so many people. No mother deserves to bury her son, and no mother deserves to see her son change. My bad choice led to a lose-lose situation for me, my family, and the family of the victim.
Tariq went on to warn other gang members, telling them to learn from him, because what they were doing wasn't worth the consequences. He warned his brother and friends who were involved with gangs to stop so they didn't end up like him. Tariq Jackson was sentenced to 17 to 40 years in prison for the murder of 20-year-old Andrea Duff. He is currently serving his sentence at the G. Robert Cotton Correctional Facility. Up next is David Moses, a case that left many questioning what drove him to commit such a chilling act.
A chuckle, a laugh, and yawn after yawn, David Moses acted strangely at his sentencing this morning.
In April 2010, 17-year-old David Moses and 2 girls entered the home of 81-year-old Dorothy Session in California with the intent of robbing the home. David Moses and the 2 girls, 17-year-old Angelique Nash and 15-year-old Katila Nash, had planned to rob the house because they thought no one was around. Angelique was left outside to be the stakeout, while David and Katila broke into the house. Upon finding out that someone was in the house, David Moses did the most shocking thing. As Dorothy resisted, Moses beat her mercilessly until she died. Katila also watched as David pummeled Dorothy to death. The police found Dorothy dead and her body was riddled with injuries. She had a broken nose, missing teeth, black eyes, and cuts to her mouth and face. Moses was eventually found and arrested before he was finally convicted of first-degree murder 2 years later when he turned 19. The 2 sisters were arrested as well, and they were sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. It was later revealed that Moses grew up without a father figure, and he was raised by his mother until he was 12 years old. He became a ward of the court and was eventually bounced between group homes due to his erratic and violent behavior toward the other children. While Moses was in the group home, he committed multiple crimes including carjacking and burglary, which led to the murder of Dorothy Session. He was eventually brought to court in 2012. In court, Moses' behavior was shocking to the core. He showed no remorse for his actions and laughed throughout the session. In an attempt to show that he found the procedure boring, Moses yawned and put his head on the table, mimicking falling asleep. At some point, Moses also licked his lips to show that he didn't care and that he didn't believe that anything was wrong. Some online participants assumed that Moses behaved that way because he thought he'd be protected by juvenile court laws, no matter what he did in court.
The chuckle, a laugh, and yawn after yawn, David Moses acted strangely at his sentencing this morning.
David completely fell asleep at some point and didn't care for anything that was going on. The prosecutor said it seemed to him that Moses was enjoying the trial and felt like it was a game. Despite these actions and how he showed no remorse, his attorney asked the judge to consider including the possibility of parole in his sentencing. However, the judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. David showed no reaction and merely licked his lips as he was escorted out. David's case remained closed until 8 years later, when it looked like things were going to change for David. A change in law led Moses to be resentenced. He was tried under juvenile conditions because of how old he was when he murdered Dorothy. He was resentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole in 2020 because he showed no form of change since he was sent to prison and still showed no remorse for his actions for the brutal murder of Dorothy Session. During his resentencing, David remained nonchalant, but this time he had no smile on his face and just stood in defiance as he still had no regard for the court. David Moses didn't get a second chance, but Brandon Spencer still has a petition 10 years later to set him free.
Eligibility is 15 years plus 25 years of life in accordance with Penal Code Section 12022, 3D. This is to be concurrent with the
On October 31st, 2012, 19-year-old Brandon Spencer got involved in a shootout with a rival gang at a Halloween party on the University of Southern California campus. As a result of the shooting, 4 people were wounded, and the area descended into mayhem. While many students ran away from the shooting, Spencer reportedly ran with the students before he was caught. Brandon was charged with 4 counts of attempted murder. It was revealed in court that shots had been fired into the crowd in retaliation at another gang member. In 2014, Brandon went to trial, despite the fact that all the people called to testify in the case said that Brandon could not have been the shooter because he was never involved in any kind of gang. The court denied him a lawyer and charged him on a witness's testimony and no evidence that linked him to the shooting.
I'm sorry for what happened, Your Honor, but I need life in prison. And I'm not a bad person, but I made mistakes. But I'm not just some gangbanger that she tried to portray me as.
Spencer kept on insisting that he was innocent and kept on pleading for mercy because he admitted to making mistakes. However, the jury refused to take any other thing into account besides the fact that Brandon had shot into an open crowd, even though he didn't murder anyone. In under 3 hours at trial, the jury found Spencer guilty of all charges, and he was sentenced to 40 years in prison. In response, the 19-year-old broke down as the judge showed no ounce of mercy.
parole eligibility is 15 years plus 25 years of life in accordance with Penal Code Section 12022, 3D. This is to be concurrent with the
Spencer banged his head on the table twice and cried until he was escorted out. In 2021, however, a podcast was released on the story of Spencer, and his case garnered attention once again. The podcast claimed that Brandon had not shot into the crowd and was only celebrating Halloween with his girlfriend at the University of Southern California. However, the jury portrayed him as a gangbanger, and the testimony of the star witness was all that was used to convict him. The podcast also revealed that Spencer had been shot in the stomach outside a restaurant, and the USC shooting was retaliation, a mistake that Spencer regretted. The star witness recanted their testimony after the investigation revealed that the witness who had been brought in to testify against Spencer was coerced because he had been arrested for an unrelated crime. The prosecution reportedly promised to get the witnesses' charges dropped if they testified that they had seen Spencer shoot into the crowd that night. The witness was charged with stealing $26,000 worth of merchandise from his employer and was not sentenced because he agreed to perjury. The witness said, "I did not see Mr. Spencer leave the party and come back with a gun. I did not see Mr. Spencer shoot a gun into the crowd or at Mr. Hall. I only said that I saw Mr. Spencer come back with the gun because the DA prosecuting the case told me that she needed me to say those things, or else she could not make her case for premeditation. I did what the DA said because I was threatened by the detectives investigating the case, and by the DA prosecuting the case that if I did not say what they needed me to say, The DA would intervene in my own pending criminal case and cause me to be harmed or sentenced more severely. After this was revealed, a Free Brandon Spencer movement began and 1,800 people signed the petition for Spencer to be released because he was innocent. An Instagram account was created and the petition to free Brandon Spencer after he spent 10 years in jail is still ongoing. Our next case is the Carpio brothers, whose actions left a trail of devastation.
2 gang members were sentenced today for killing a teenager on a high school campus in the Valley.
In the late afternoon of April 24, 2013, Antonio and Michael Stephen Carpio, known as the Rockwoods, due to their affiliation with the Rampart area street gang with the same name, arrived at Cleveland High School to pick up their 15-year-old brother, George, who was a student. Raised in Los Angeles, the Carpio brothers had been initiated into one of the notorious Rockwood street gangs in the Westlake area, which led their family to move to Panorama City in hopes of distancing themselves from the grip of gang life. It's speculated that one or both of the assailants may have also attended Cleveland High at some point, according to accounts from students. It was during this visit to the school that they encountered Kevin Orellana, a former student who still visited the campus to play handball with his friends. Orellana, an 18-year-old known for his athleticism and agility, was also called La Pulga, in English, the Flea, for his small stature and lightning-fast reflexes as a soccer goalie. Despite having graduated from Reseda High School a year prior, Orellana continued to spend time at Cleveland High while attending the West Valley Occupational Center in Woodland Hills to complete his high school education.
As a parent, we plan to dance at their wedding, celebrate a promotion, look forward to possible grandchildren. The last thought we would ever have is that we will have to plan their funeral.
Kevin Orellana of North Hollywood aspired to be a rapper, with plans to pursue enrollment in Cal State Northridge's esteemed kinesiology program as a backup. Despite his shaved head and numerous tattoos, Orellana staunchly distanced himself from gang affiliations, a fact reiterated by both Doerbecker and his family members. But his encounter with the Carpio brothers made everything crash. As the elder Carpio asked Orellana where he was from, insinuating gang ties, Orellana firmly denied any such association, saying that he belonged to no gang. The altercation escalated swiftly, with the taller Carpio initiating physical violence. Yet Orellana, despite his smaller stature, quickly gained the upper hand. But the confrontation took a tragic turn when the younger Carpio brother brandished a knife from his pocket and delivered 2 fatal stab wounds to Orellana's chest. Afterward, the Carpio brothers quickly fled the scene, with members of the Cleveland football team in pursuit. Despite efforts to catch them, the brothers managed to escape to a maroon minivan. Orellana was quickly transported to Northridge Hospital Medical Center, but it was too late to save him. Medical examination revealed a fatal stab wound piercing his heart, sealing his untimely demise and leaving a community reeling in shock and grief. Upon arriving at the crime scene, the police documented every detail. Among the array of evidence, they noted the remnants of the victim's clothing and traced a trail of blood and red stains on the asphalt, which suggested a frantic escape. One notable detail that caught the police's attention was a water bottle belonging to a teacher who tried to help the victim. But it was the unwavering courage of the student witnesses that left a lasting impression. Despite the looming threat of retaliation in a gang-affiliated case, these young individuals stood firm, eager to provide invaluable testimony. One particular student provided key details, linking one of the suspects to a distinctive tattoo often seen on campus, ultimately leading to the identification of Michael Carpio. Following their apprehension at their residence in Panorama City, the Carpio brothers offered varying accounts on the events leading up to the fatal stabbing. Michael Carpio claimed that Orellana had provoked him with a threatening glare, while Anthony initially denied involvement before eventually conceding to being present on the campus. But when pressed for a motive behind the stabbing, Anthony's response remained cryptic. In the end, Anthony Carpio of Panorama City and his brother, Michael Steve Carpio, from Pacoima, were found guilty on October 31, 2015, of second-degree murder in connection with the tragic death of Kevin Orellana. Anthony, who was 16 years old at the time of the fatal incident when he wielded a knife and inflicted multiple stab wounds upon Orellana, received a sentence of 16 years to life in prison. Meanwhile, his older brother Michael, who was an adult at the time of the April 24, 2013 killing and was reportedly unarmed during the attack, was sentenced to 15 years to life behind bars. This case serves as a tragic reminder that the mentality of gang members can have a devastating impact on the innocent. If the Carpio brothers hadn't gotten involved with their gang at such young ages, Kevin Orellana would be alive today. Now, we're going all the way to Springfield, where a Latin King member is facing first-degree murder charges.
Charged with robbery, drug crimes, and other offenses. A spokesperson for the district attorney's office, Jim Lagden, told 22 News another defendant, Jonathan Guevara, was also charged with the murder of 18-year-old Lopez.
The discovery of 18-year-old Latin King member Kenneth Lopez's body on March 25, 2015, sent shockwaves through the city's north end. Found in the yard of a house at Dwight and Calhoun Streets, Lopez had succumbed to fatal gunshot wounds sustained overnight. The perpetrator behind this was revealed to be a 25-year-old Latin King member, Lee Rios. Following the murder, Rios stockpiled ammunition and firearms as he believed that the gang would seek retribution for his actions. The murder of Kenneth Lopez was not a spur-of-the-moment act, but rather a meticulously planned and aggressively pursued crime. Rios himself orchestrated the murder with calculated precision, with the help of fellow Latin Kings members. Despite both Lopez and Rios being affiliated with the Latin Kings, their relationship had soured, leading to a falling out between them. In an attempt to reconcile their differences, Rios devised a plan to lure Lopez from his residence under the guise of resolving a personal conflict. But his intentions proved futile, and it culminated in a tragic and fatal outcome. On February 7, 2017, Lee Rios faced the consequences of his actions as he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As he listened to the judge reading the verdict, Rios' demeanor was quite calm for someone who just found out that they will be spending the rest of their lives behind bars. Our next case is Denali Bremer, a teenager whose shocking crime was fueled by manipulation and a sinister online scheme.
She was 19 years old and developmentally disabled. Investigators say she was killed because of an online scheme. A man they had never met promised millions of dollars to murder someone.
He was very matter-of-fact about the whole thing, almost glib. When he told me about shooting Cynthia in the head and kicking her body into the water, he laughed. And I will never in my life forget that.
In Alaska's remote wilderness, a sinister betrayal unfolded. Cynthia Hoffman, a kind-hearted 19-year-old, believed that she was on a simple hiking trip with friends. Instead, she walked into a calculated trap, one that would end her life in a chilling and senseless murder.
It all began with a bizarre online catfishing scheme.
Darren Schillmiller posed as a millionaire online, offering $9 million to, quote, rape and murder someone in Alaska.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do it. I didn't mean to do it.
Cynthia Hoffman was blissfully unaware. The 18-year-old she considered her best friend had targeted her in a murder plot. Her uncle Don Hoffman says that was characteristic of her trusting nature and naivete.
Denali Bremer, then 18, was lured into a dark web of manipulation by an online predator. The man, posing as a wealthy millionaire named Tyler, promised her $9 million in exchange for video evidence of a murder. Blinded by greed and eager to please her catfish, Denali began plotting a crime so heinous it shocked even seasoned investigators. To carry out the plan, she recruited 2 accomplices, including 16-year-old Caden McIntosh, and chose Cynthia Hoffman, her best friend, as the target. Cynthia, who had developmental disabilities, trusted Denali completely. That trust was heartlessly exploited. On June 2, 2019, Denali lured Cynthia on a hike near the Eklutna River under the influence of a fun outing. But for Denali and her accomplices, it was the perfect setting for murder.
The plot to murder Hoffman began when Denali Bremer began an online relationship with a man calling himself Tyler and claimed to be a millionaire. But Tyler was really 21-year-old Darren Schillmiller. He told Bremer if she murdered someone and sent him photos and videos of it, then he would give her $9 million. The teens lured Hoffman to Thunderbird Falls trailhead for a hike. McIntosh shot her in the head and put her body in the river. One day after she went missing, her body was found bound with duct tape.
The betrayal came swiftly. Once on the trail, Cynthia was ambushed. The group duct taped her hands and feet, rendering her defenseless. As she begged for her life, Caden McIntosh shot her in the back of the head with a handgun provided by Denali. Denali documented the entire crime, capturing photos and videos that she sent to Tyler as proof. The group then discarded Cynthia's body in a river, leaving her to be discovered by authorities days later. What makes this crime even more shocking? Tyler wasn't real. He was Darren Schillmiller, a 21-year-old from Indiana who had catfished Denali, preying on her vulnerability to orchestrate the crime from afar. The investigation moved quickly. Cynthia's family reported her missing, and police soon uncovered the group's twisted plan through text messages, social media exchanges, and incriminating footage. Denali's cold confession during questioning left detectives stunned.
I know what I did was wrong, and I know I could have probably done something different if I was able to.
Late this afternoon, a 23-year-old woman has received a 99-year prison sentence for her role in the 2019 murder of Cynthia Hoffman near Thunderbird Falls. Lauren Maxwell, just out of the courtroom.
Denali Bremer was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and tampering with evidence. In court, she admitted to the crimes and expressed regret, but the damage was irreparable. She was sentenced to 99 years in prison without parole, ensuring she spent the rest of her life behind bars.
The only thing I know is that my daughter trusted these people. My daughter just wanted friends. Now I have to bury her.
She was a very smart, bright, vibrant young lady. She loved life. She loved music. She liked shopping, just regular kid stuff.
The courtroom was heavy with grief as Cynthia's family confronted Denali. Her father described Cynthia as an innocent, trusting soul whose kindness was cruelly taken advantage of. He called the crime unforgivable and a tragic reminder of the dangers of online manipulation.
The hurt I caused you and your family, I can never rectify in any way. I understand it hurts. You lost a precious child, and the community lost a daughter as well.
Denali, for her part, broke down during sentencing, but her tears did little to comfort those she had devastated. Her calculated actions and the gruesome details of Cynthia's murder left the courtroom speechless. Denali's case wasn't just a story of manipulation. It was a cautionary tale of how easily trust can be weaponized. Cynthia Hoffman's life was stolen in an act of pure betrayal, and the devastating loss is a wound that her loved ones will carry forever. Denali may spend the rest of her life behind bars, but for Cynthia's family, justice will never bring true closure. The choices made by these teens forever altered their lives and the lives of their families. These cases painted a grim picture of the devastating consequences of unchecked pain, neglect, and anger. In our next video on screen, we'll dive into even more chilling cases and the condemned that left the world in disbelief.